Good evening. My name is Becky Edmunds, and I'm the director of the Center for the Art of Performance at UCLA. It is so incredible to be able to see you all here tonight at 365 Mission. I wanted to acknowledge just straight out of the gate, Ben Johnson, who works with me, who creates all these amazing latitude connections so that we are not trapped at Royce Hall, but in fact moving around the community. So to Ben. I also really want to thank Laura and Ethan from 365 and Wendy of Ooga Booga for hosting us, for having us, for inviting us, for saying yes, and obviously all of you. Deborah Hay has been in residence with us working on different kind of analytical things and creative things as we plan other kind of projects for the future around dance and choreography and performance practice and what it means to be, I suppose, an artist in the 21st century working in kinds of fields that we can't collect and own and buy, but we can hold inside of ourselves as part of human heritage. So Deborah's been with us in residence for a month, and this is a really special opportunity to be able to see a film that she's made. I just want to introduce her, but before I do, quickly, afterwards and after the film screens, Deborah will be up here again in conversation with Ros Warby, an amazing choreographer, dancer, and practitioner and collaborator with Deborah, as well as Susan Foster, who's an impeccable dance scholar. So that'll be a chance for us to get to know them and to talk further about what's in the film and also what's on your mind. So please welcome briefly to introduce the film, Deborah Hay.
I feel so loved in this community. I've just met so many wonderful people, and I just want to thank all of you for those little meetings we've had for the last 3 weeks, and thank Christy and Cap UCLA and the people who are running this space. This is home for me. It just feels great. I want to say a few things. I just want to say one thing about the film "Turn Your Fucking Head," because it doesn't really. I don't really get to it. That phrase "Turn Your Fucking Head." I don't get to it in the film the way I have gotten to it after the film was made. So I just want to say this about it. It's so big, for all of us who are in performance and who have, without even knowing it, unconsciously taken on this look of authority and intelligence and artistry and being on top of it all and holding it all together and all of this head thing that doesn't really dare and move because you might lose sight of something that you're going for. And since I identified that in a film of myself, a movie that was made of myself, I was sitting in a room with a couple of people, and all of them like this, "Turn your fucking head, Deborah. Just turn your fucking head." And I couldn't say it out loud with the people I was with, but that's what I was feeling. That's what I was feeling. And so this is just, a message for any of you in performance. If you feel that way, that thing, that you have to hold it together. The message is it's everywhere. Whatever you want, go for it. Just go for it. You don't, let it go. Get it from everywhere. You don't need to stay. You don't need this stuff. It's an old form, and it's time we got rid of it. And so that's an introduction to this.
I want to again thank everybody for being here. This is a chance to ask questions, have a discussion, be part of a dialogue around this amazing documentary. But also, I think it's really important that we're here in this particular space, and I just want to call it out again to Laura and everybody here. You can always tell when the hand of an artist has made a space, because it's a hand of permission, and it's a hand of elegance, and it's a hand of a variety of things, and this space is such a great place to be, so thank you all. So, Deborah, you guys are going to start out. I don't know how you want to start. Deborah Hay, you guys know a bit about already. Susan Foster, an incredible scholar in dance, postmodern theory, a variety of other things, and also a performance creator herself. And Ros Warby from Australia, who's worked a lot with Deborah, but has her own independent choreographic practice as a dancer and is now based in Los Angeles. So welcome and thank you, all three of you. Please.
Anybody have any ideas? What do you think?
There you go.
Oh, good. Questions. That always helps.
I was wondering how you developed the score. Like what's the process like? The structure of the games themselves?
Oh, I can hardly remember. No, what I do when I'm making a piece for the solo, I did 14 of these. This was the last one in 2012. So what I would do as soon as one ended, what would I do? Oh, I would go into the studio and do a movement practice for an hour. And over that, I thought, I can't remember how I do this. My God. I think what I do, and I know I'm going to make a dance, I go into the studio and I go like this. I mean, really just and then I write that down. I might say flipping my fingers around, going, putting my tongue, making sounds, doing my knees back and forth. And I do that for about 3 weeks. I go in and I just do nothing, as much as possible, nothing. And I describe it in language, and I put it aside. And I just make this list for about 3 weeks. I make this list, trying to not attach anything to it, just nothing. And then I take the list, terribly John Cagean, and I tear it up, and I crumple it up, and I put it in a hat or a box, and I go away from it for a month or two. So I lose connection with that material. Then I come back to it, and really this is what I did for 14 years. I take it out and I unfurl it from the crumple, and I read it, and I don't know what I mean most of the time, and that becomes the order, the pulling it out, that becomes the first movement, and then the next one, the second movement. And I recreate it again from the description, which I really don't mostly remember what it meant. And that becomes the form for the dance. Then I spend the next 8 months performing that sequence and learning from that sequence of material that I have no real emotional connection with, even no physical connection with, any connection with. I perform that sequence day after, I perform that sequence day after day until the dance is complete. I know that the dance is finished, but it's through the performing of this inane material, through the performance of it, I learn how to
describe it. I learn what it begins to take on a life of its own. It teaches me what it is, and then I teach that to the dancers. Ros, maybe you could talk about what that is like, having learned several of those dances, just, right fresh off of the making.
I've done two solo commissioning projects early on in this format, and 3 if you count the Bundanon one. But when Deborah first delivers that score, that material, and you spend the first 3, 4, 5 days learning the sequence, the first attempt at any one of those instructions, let alone a sequence of them one after the other, feels like shit. It's so disgusting, and it's really, you feel like a fool, you feel the impossibility of it, you feel like the absurdity of it, but you feel self-conscious in the absurdity of it. And it's through that practice of the actual instruction or the setup that actually reveals the possibility of what the potential of that is in performance. And so the experience of the 10 days is extraordinary. You get a lot of information. You get a lot of information through the practice of it. You get a lot of information from watching. The hours we would spend sitting with Deborah, you saw the people sitting next to her. They're notating instructions or feedback she's giving to the performer of that moment. That process in itself is extraordinary in terms of your learning, of understanding what you're seeing, and that's what you're seeing and that feedback that's coming back to your body is it's so rich in information that I can't even describe what that is, but over years of experiencing that has served me as deeply as practicing it. But that continuity of daily practice, at the time I did it, we only had a 3-month contract, not a 9-month contract, but that, just how the work reveals itself through that. There's no way you could preconceive how you would end up or where you would end up, not only at the end of the process, but at any one performance. You just cannot even organise that in your brain. It's the information is coming from somewhere else.
Susan, maybe you could say something about seeing different adaptations.
I was only going to say that I haven't done it, so I haven't felt like shit doing it. But it seems to me that the inanity, that was your word, of the instructions is very productive, because we often learn in dance that we're there to express something, or that we're there to try really hard and show how good we are. And the silliness and the nonsensicalness and the non sequitur nature of these instructions just throws back in your face all of those kinds of assumptions that you might come into the studio with. And it immediately displaces your attention onto this toolkit of questions that Deborah is also providing, so that you just have to go somewhere else in order to just continue to move in the space. And I think that seems like a really powerful, positive pedagogical maneuver.
There's a place where there was a man talking about the words and keeping the words, and how long do you keep the words of the questions? Mm-hmm. And you said something about after 9 months or so, there's I don't know if you said a feeling, but something you can identify that is whatever that question might be. And that was the biggest surprise for me throughout, because in my practice time with you, I don't know, I got some message over time that if I start to recognize it, then I'm in some kind of choreographed body, even if I've done it to myself. And so if I start to, and it happens to me mostly with inviting being seen, there's something that happens that is too recognizable, and then I wonder if I'm on top of the question in the way I want to be. So I wonder if you could just talk a little more about that recognition of something familiar through a practice over time, and how is that the same or different from choreographed body, or being choreographed by something.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at that moment when you can't let it go entirely. The linearity, you can let the linearity of the question go for a certain amount of time, and then you have to check in with yourself and return to the linearity and check in with yourself, and then you can let it go for a while. But I think you have to oversee your practice. Does that, yeah.
Like the meta or the witness, or there's something. You were talking about your process, and after you unfurl, and then leave it, and then come back. There was the performance part. You perform it, and I think you said it teaches. Is there an audience when you're performing? And I imagine not always. So this is also, I guess, a question for learning in the 3 months or 6 months. Is there an audience? Is an audience required? How do you perform without an audience?
Do you want to talk about that, Ros?
And I guess connected to that, I'm swirling in there is also how powerful it seems you spoke to, but also watching, seeing each other practice. There's a strong audiencing, witnessing. I've never done.
With the seeing each other practice, I'm practicing seeing. I'm practicing the thing that we're setting up that Deborah's setting up in the first place. And I'm practicing it in a very potent relationship, because that person is practicing this thing that's been set up. So there's a whole circuit going on there, or I don't know, there's just a presumption that everybody's seeing this common work that everybody's involved in, including the viewer. And alongside that, Deborah is articulating what she's seeing. Not directly, she's tricking you as she's giving directions. She's choosing language that identifies a particular something that she's seeing, a habit, a pattern, or an attention, a seeing, a quality of seeing. She's picking that up, and then the language that's being shot out at the performer is very specific, and it's specific in its direction. It's also specific in the timing with which she's doing that. And so it's the seeing is also the listening, and the seeing and the listening at the same time, and it's all, which is kind of what the performer's doing too. But what were you asking in the first place?
A lot was mixed up in there, but in the time when you're in the process of making the solos, you spoke about a time of performing a lot, which is part of your
audience.
Is there an audience?
Yeah. Oh, so I talk about. I actually use the word practice. I'm in the. I use the term. I am in the practice of performance. So because I am in the practice of performance, and most of the time there is no audience. I am in the practice of in other words, when I am going into the studio to enter into a dance, I enter into the practice of the performance of that dance. That performance is a practice. It isn't something I'm doing. It's a practice, and it has many facets to it. And most of the time, there is in my life, most of the time when I'm in practice of performance, there is no audience. Nevertheless, I'm practicing inviting being seen, whether or not there's an audience or not.
You've even said, I mean, I remember this from, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you were working on this idea of inviting being seen, and you were actually imagining a certain portion of your consciousness out in the space of where the audience might be, and that's also part of the extension of your awareness of the practice of performing.
Yeah, I think inviting being seen, one sends oneself out in several directions, all directions, as many directions at once. So I am inviting there is no one I am. So that's the great thing about using with the cellular body, or this concept of I invite being seen. There are so many so many attributes of the self out there seeing the performance that's happening. And the more selves I can project out there when I am inviting being seen, the more intimate my performance feels. My practice of performance feels. The more of me who are witnessing my performance, the more intimate my experience of performance is.
So the experience of how you seeing and how you're seeing you in relationship to the space is constantly changing. So it's not it's just not fixed at all.
I'm interested in all these like mantras and toolbox kind of tools as an instructor for technique, and I was just wondering what your thoughts. I actually use invite being seeing and the cellular body and my whole body at once, the teacher, and move your fucking head as a part of my as what I say throughout my technique class. And I was wondering what your thoughts were. I guess what I'm interested in as an educator is teaching performance, and I think this enhances that. But I'd just like to know what your thoughts are as far as a technique. Introducing these into a technique. You talk about the impossibility in like ballet or even contemporary dance forms. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it could be used in any. I think it could be used in any technique.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had the experience where somebody who worked with me in a workshop who was a member of Cunningham's company, and when he went back after doing a short workshop with me, he felt that Merce just kept picking him out in role after role. And he felt that it doesn't matter what you're doing. So it's just something I always say. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It's how you're doing. It's how you're using this material. It has nothing to do with what you're doing. It's how. It's not about what you're doing. It's how facile you are with using these tools to practice a relationship with something more than what you're doing. It's a means of being in a relationship with something greater than what you are doing at the moment. It's a way of enlarging the experience of performance to include your audience, to include the space in which you're dancing, to include the time passing while you're dancing, to include the other dancers with whom you're dancing. It's a practice of enlargement, and it really has nothing at all to do. You could use it for anything.
The first program that I ever performed, solo and toured, was a triple bill, and one of the pieces was Deborah's, and one was mine, and one was choreographed by an Australian choreographer called Lucy Guerin, which was very, very, very... She's a choreographer of really specific detail, like everything's choreographed down to the... she shows you what to do. And my experience across those three solos, I'd been working with Deborah for several years by that stage, and the thrill I got, and of being able to practice this work across those three pieces, across that entire program, and apply this practice of performance across those three pieces was very available to me and present, and it's still true to this day, whichever I'm working with. I'm teaching technique this quarter, which I have never taught since for 20 years, and I was talked into it, and it's fascinating to watch undergrads. We're doing stuff, tendus and pliés and stuff, but I'm working with that. That's kind of what I've been doing with Deborah for a long time, and the visibility of that in the students is of them working from that directive and getting the shifts. It's very clear.
I have a question about the questions. What kind of questions did you have the dancers ask themselves? And could you go into a little bit more about the purpose of the questions? Is it to jolt them out of something, or?
let's see. There were, I think there were about five questions. You want to know what they were? Okay. All the questions go like this. What if? Okay, so that's very important. What if? It's not a big deal. So, what if every cell in my body at once has the potential to, I'm trying to remember what this was, to, what if every cell in my body at once has the potential to, to invite being seen? No big deal. Every cell in the body can't do that at once. So, what if every cell in my body at once has the potential to invite being seen? That's the spirit of it.
Another one of Deborah's was, what if every cell in my body had the potential to draw energy from 360 degrees to make my fire burn? 1999. Fire.
They're kind of what you get facile with is, when you need a question, what if my whole body, what if every cell in my body at once has the potential to get what it needs? Just that.
These are tools to be used in performance.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's what we're juggling. We're juggling these questions just to keep us engaged in our bodies, in relationship with the audience, in relationship to the other dancers, in relationship to the space, in relationship to time passing.
So Deborah would often remind us or see the proposition, the questions, the choreography, the choreographic instructions, the layer upon layer upon layer of information that the dancer is dealing with sets them up to be working, to be so busy that they're too busy to be somewhere that to be seduced by themselves or to be hanging around in something they know, to basically not to be doing what they know because they're too busy working with all these propositions. So you see the dancer working.
What is your experience, Susan? Maybe you could just say something about what it is like, just to see that work. I mean, just as somebody who sees a lot of dance, like how. What is it that you're seeing that might be otherwise than?
Well, you're seeing a process rather than a product that's being presented to you. So you're seeing someone engaging in this ongoing inquiry. And it shifts so many expectations and assumptions that we might have about why we would go see dance. Because it's not about how good they are in those conventional ways that you could measure, or criteria of virtuosity or excellence, and it's not also about how fervently someone is feeling something, or how earnestly or sincerely they're feeling whatever they're feeling. It's really about this process of watching someone continually trying to connect in a different way. So it's a really different sense of what dance can be. Very exciting, I think, sense of what dance can be.
Yeah. Yeah. You were going to ask her to dance?
Well, I was thinking that it might make concrete differently something, but, you know, as a curator who's presented your work in multiple situations in different cities and different countries, and as I listen to you guys talking and the rapport and the questions that aren't being asked, but the feelings that are being felt, right? I can say with a certain degree of not authority, but humanity, that in curating something, you're looking for the way in which artists are really actively and authentically finding points of wisdom that can permeate. Because really, when you look at an audience and when you're looking at that, there's something about how do you, in a world that is seeking to constantly extract things, how do you create points of replenishment? And those replenishment points are often abstract, unknown, non-prescribed. It's kind of up to somebody else to grab what that is when it's there. But you can feel an expressive truth that's not coming through a hyperverbal method. It's coming from something we all have, something we all know, but don't often know what to do with. And when you watch Deborah's work happen on a stage with the practitioners, they're not burdened with the pressure of line, marks, blocking, and choreography, but a kind of liberated autonomy of choice that is so vulnerable and powerful in its seeking to give everything possible in that moment. So with Deborah, it's like if you revert to your line and your virtuosity, you're sacrificing a truth that we need. How do we do that work? Is what I end up seeing, which I just thought I'd mention briefly. Does anybody else have a major question? Yes.
I have another question. I've been taking clowning classes, and I was really struck by how much your principles align with my particular teacher, who teaches in a different way than many other clowns, I'm told. And I was wondering if you could talk about duration, because in that form, the duration is so much determined by the audience and the like flow and the interaction between the audience and the performer. Yeah, and so I was just wondering if you could talk about that as it relates to performing without an audience or alone.
With your mic, if you don't mind.
So are you talking about a practice, the practice of performance alone?
Like developing a piece or developing a structure for a choreography, or the choreography itself, or just the duration, I guess, is just how do you determine, or not determine, what's the feeling, maybe you can't describe it, of like a stopping point, or
right.
Enough.
Yeah, yeah. It's tricky because I love to repeat without repeating, and then at a certain point I'm repeating. And so you have to be able to catch that moment when repeating without repeating becomes repeating and repeating. And sometimes I can maintain it for longer periods, and I love that challenge. But I can't, you know, it depends on, yeah, I don't think there's an answer to it. As long as I can not repeat in my repeat, and I can see that, and I know that. I know when I'm falling into a pattern. And sometimes when I'm falling into a pattern, I can alter it enough in terms of spacing, in terms of timing. I can alter it just enough so that I know that it's not repeating exactly. But it requires just a phenomenal amount of attention to keep something up.
Something Deborah's often said in relation to that is sort of, and for me, something that I've worked with a lot, but Deborah's, as soon as you recognise where you are, she says, as soon as you recognise where you are, to let go of the recognition of where you are, and the amount of feedback, if she's coaching or if she's watching the solo. There's no, sometimes that you give time frames on how, you know, this section's about 20 seconds long or whatever, but the creating, I mean, really taking a lot of time beyond what the natural rhythm or pattern that you have in your body. The relationship to time in all of Deborah's work is huge, and how you play that. And that too, through the practice of it daily, reveals itself. And you learn to do what she was just describing because you've done it so many times. You don't want to. You're not. It's not interesting to just keep. But yeah, it reveals the timing and the structure, and each person's adaptation reveals itself through the practice of it, attending to a lot of these things that she's talking about.
I think that's good. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Ros. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, 365 Mission. Thank you all for being here. Hang out, come up, chat.